What if fear is not what's holding you back? What if it's something deeper, something hidden in the way your mind tells stories about risk, loss, and failure? Too often people believe fear is the enemy, but Brendon Burchard challenges us to look closer. He says fear is not just about being scared, it's about the meaning we attach to the moments ahead. And once you see it for what it really is, you can begin to take back your power. Imagine this. As someone has a dream, a passion, a vision that lights them up, but when the time comes to act, they freeze. They say, I'm afraid. They think fear is this wall that cannot be moved. But what if that wall is paper thin? What if, instead of being the thing stopping you, fear is the signal pointing you toward growth? Brendon once shared that most fears people talk about, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, are not rooted in reality. They are rooted in imagined pains. The pain of losing something, the pain of going through a tough process, or the pain of an outcome that might not be perfect. That is not a monster to fight. That is a story to rewrite. And here's where it gets powerful. Brendon explains that courage doesn't come because fear disappears. Courage comes because you decide something is more important than fear. Think about that for a second. Every breakthrough you've ever had in life didn't come because the fear left. It came because you chose to move anyway. That's the shift that too many people miss. They wait for fear to fade before they begin, but waiting only lets fear grow stronger. So why should you watch this video until the very end? Because today you're not just going to hear another speech about face your fears. You're going to learn Brendon's unique way of breaking fear down. You'll see why fear often masks itself as procrastination or doubt. You'll discover how fear quietly drains potential without you even noticing. And you'll uncover a truth that most people never realize. Fear is not permanent. It's a passing state of mind, one that you can shift with the right awareness and habits. There's also something else. Brendon's story isn't just theories and quotes. Years ago, he survived a near-death car accident. In those moments, as glass shattered and life seemed to slip away, he asked himself 3 questions. Did I live? Did I love? Did I matter? That brush with mortality reshaped his understanding of fear forever. It showed him that what we call fear is often just the mind clinging to comfort zones, distracting us from what really matters. And that insight, born from life and death, gives his teaching a weight you can't ignore. Think about your own life. How many times have you held back? Not because the world was dangerous, but because your mind whispered, what if you fail? What if they laugh? What if you're not ready? What if those whispers were lies? What if they were echoes of a smaller version of you, trying to protect itself? And what if, just beyond that, fear is the life you've been waiting for? That's the drama of fear. It feels like a prison, but in truth, the door has never been locked. Stay with me, because in this video, you're going to learn how to open that door. You're going to learn how Brendon Burchard takes fear apart piece by piece. You'll discover the 3 pains that create fear, how to flip the what-if question into fuel, and how daily courage builds momentum until fear has no hold on you. You'll see that fear doesn't vanish. It transforms into power when you act with intention. This isn't about theory. This is about your life. Every day that fear wins, dreams are delayed. Every time fear wins, potential is wasted. But when you learn what Brendon teaches, fear becomes the very thing that sharpens you. And once you know how to use it, nothing can stop you. So if you've ever wondered why fear feels so strong, if you've ever wanted to break free from the invisible chains that keep you small, then don't just watch a little, watch to the end. Because by the time we're done, you'll have tools, clarity, and courage you can use today. Welcome to Habits of Greatness, where we study the teachings of Brendon Burchard and bring them to life in a way that transforms your everyday actions. If you're ready to grow, ready to push past fear, and ready to claim your best self, then this is your space. Make sure to subscribe right now so you never miss the lessons that can change everything. Now let's step into Brendon Burchard's world and uncover the truth about how to overcome fear. Before we talk about the strategies to beat fear, we first need to understand what fear really is. Most people think of fear only in terms of danger, like standing too close to the edge of a cliff or hearing a sudden loud noise in the dark. That kind of fear is primal. It's built into our biology to keep us alive. But the fear that controls our daily lives is not usually about survival. Brendon Burchard explains that the fear that rules us most often is not about tigers in the jungle, but about the stories in our minds. Think about it. You're not in danger when you sit down to write that book. You're not at risk of death when you raise your hand in a meeting. You're not under physical threat when you tell someone you love them. Yet, those moments make our stomachs turn. They make our voices shake. They make us hesitate. Why? Because fear in modern life is rarely about reality. It's about imagination. It's about the what-ifs we whisper to ourselves when no one else can hear. Brendon says fear is often a fiction. It's a projection of failure, rejection, or embarrassment that hasn't even happened yet. But our brains treat it as if it's already real. And when we repeat those thoughts, what if I mess up? What if I lose everything? What if I'm not enough? The body reacts. Our heart races. Our breath shortens, and we freeze. The imagined pain creates the same signals as physical pain. It feels real. So we treat it as if it is real. But here's the secret most people miss. Fear is a mental construction. It is not a fact. It is a forecast. It's the brain rehearsing negative outcomes, usually without evidence. We fear rejection before we even ask. We fear losing before we even try. We fear judgment before anyone even looks our way. That's how powerful our inner storyteller can be. It spins entire movies in our minds of how badly things might go, and then convinces us those movies are the truth. Brendon breaks this down even further by showing us the three main pains that create fear. The first is the pain of loss. This is when we believe that if we act, we'll lose something valuable. Our money, our time, our reputation, our comfort. The thought of losing is so strong that we stop before we even start. The second is the pain of process. This is the idea that even if we want something, the journey will be too hard, too long, or too uncomfortable. We picture ourselves exhausted, failing, overwhelmed, so we never take the first step. The third is the pain of outcome. This is a belief that even if we try, the result won't be worth it. We imagine working hard and then still falling short, so we give up before the game even begins. And do you see how all of these pains are stories? None of them are guaranteed. None of them are happening in the present. But when our minds tell these stories over and over, we start to believe them. And once we believe them, fear rules our decisions. Think of the countless dreams lost because of these imagined pains. Someone has an idea for a business, but says, what if I lose money? Someone has a desire to write, but says, what if nobody reads it? Someone wants to change careers, but says, what if it doesn't work out? In each case, the fear is not a fact. It is an untested story about the future. Yet that story is powerful enough to stop action. Brendon often reminds us that the quality of our life is determined by the quality of the stories we tell ourselves. If fear is ruling you, it's because you've rehearsed negative stories more than empowering ones. The what-if questions have been tilted against you. You've been asking, what if it goes wrong, far more often than what if it goes right? And whichever question you ask most will shape how you feel and ultimately how you act. So how much of fear is real and how much is imagined? Science and psychology suggest that the vast majority of fear is mental. Studies show that our brains are wired with a negativity bias. That means we notice threats faster than opportunities. In ancient times, that bias helped us survive. But today, it tricks us into exaggerating problems that don't exist. Brendon explains that this bias, left unchecked, becomes a breeding ground for worry. And worry, rehearsed long enough, becomes fear. But here's where it becomes even more fascinating. The body doesn't actually know the difference between a real danger and an imagined one. When you picture failing in front of others, your brain sends the same signals as if you were facing a predator. That's why your palms sweat before a presentation. That's why your stomach twists before a difficult conversation. The mind imagines the worst, the body reacts as if it's real, and suddenly fear feels inescapable. Yet, the truth, Brendon points out, is simple. Most fear is a liar. It's a story made up by a part of the brain designed to keep you safe. But safety and growth cannot live in the same space. If you only ever listen to fear, you'll never step beyond comfort. And if you never step beyond comfort, you'll never grow. So, why does fear so often rule us? Because we rarely question it. We take the first fearful thought that pops up and treat it as fact. We don't pause to ask, is this true? Is this likely? Is this helpful? Instead, we obey it like a command. Fear says, stay here, and we stay. Fear says, don't try, and we don't. Fear says, you'll fail, and we accept defeat before we've even started. But fear is not the voice of truth. It's the voice of protection. It's the mind saying, I'd rather you be safe and small than risk being hurt. And while that intention might seem caring, it's also the very reason so many people live below their potential. Because safe and small might protect you from pain, but it also protects you from greatness. When Brendon Burchard teaches about fear, he doesn't tell you to eliminate it. He tells you to understand it, to see it clearly, to recognize that most of what you fear is not real. It is rehearsed. And once you recognize that, fear begins to lose its grip. You start to realize that behind every fearful thought is simply a choice. Do I believe this story, or do I write a new one? That's the real definition of fear in modern life. Not danger, not threat, but imagination gone wrong. It is the mind predicting pain and convincing the body to stay still. It rules us because we mistake it for truth. But the moment you recognize it as a story and nothing more, you open the door to freedom. Fear doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It comes from specific places. And Brendon Burchard explains this with clarity. He says, there are three main pains that create fear. And if you can see these pains for what they are, you'll begin to loosen fear's grip. The first is loss pain. This is the fear that if you act, you'll lose something valuable. People cling to what they already have, even when what they have is keeping them stuck. Maybe you want to start a new business, but you fear losing your savings. Maybe you want to leave a toxic relationship, but you fear losing comfort or stability. Maybe you want to change careers, but you fear losing the respect of people around you. That is loss pain. It convinces you that the price of change is too high, even when the cost of staying the same is your own happiness. Brendon teaches that loss pain is one of the most powerful chains holding people back because it feeds on attachment. We protect what we know, even when what we know is destroying us. The second is process pain. This is the fear of the journey itself. It's the voice that says, it will be too hard. It will take too long. You'll get tired. You'll fail along the way. Process pain is sneaky because it makes the road look endless before you've even taken a step. For example, someone dreams of getting fit, but the thought of months in the gym, changing diet, and waking up early feels unbearable. Someone else wants to write a book, but the idea of long hours at the desk, constant rewrites, and setbacks makes them freeze. They never start, not because they don't want the result, but because they're already exhausted by imagining the process. Brendon says this kind of fear is especially dangerous because it kills dreams in silence. It convinces you to quit before the journey even begins. The third is outcome pain. This is when you fear that even if you put in all the work, it still won't be worth it. You imagine trying, sweating, striving, and then failing anyway. Or you imagine succeeding, but the reward doesn't feel as good as you hoped. Outcome pain whispers, why bother? It won't work. It won't last. You'll regret it. This pain is brutal because it erodes motivation. It tricks you into believing the finish line isn't worth the race. Brendon explains that outcome pain is often the final barrier people put between themselves and their dreams. It's the thought that makes them say, what's the point? These three pains, loss, process, and outcome, are not facts. They are fears painted onto the canvas of the future. They are imagined struggles that stop people in the present. But once you recognize them, you gain power. You see that fear is not mysterious. It's simply your mind telling stories about loss, difficulty, and disappointment. Brendon then teaches us how to flip this script. He says, you must reframe fear by changing the question. Most people ask, what if I fail? That question immediately sends the mind down a spiral of negativity. But what if you asked instead, what if I win? That small shift changes everything. Suddenly, the mind begins to imagine success, growth, opportunity, pride, and when you focus on those images, Your energy rises. The same imagination that once trapped you in fear now becomes a tool for courage. The power of flipping what-if questions is extraordinary. A student about to take an exam might think, what if I forget everything and feel paralyzed? But if they switch it to, what if I remember more than I expect? They feel hopeful. An entrepreneur might think, what if this product fails and stall? But if they ask, what if this changes someone's life? They move forward. Brendon says the mind follows the direction of the questions you ask. Change the question, and you change your future. But there's another mistake many people make. They blame fear as if fear itself is the problem. Brendon points out that fear is often not the real cause. The deeper issue might be limiting beliefs, broken habits, or a lack of purpose. If you don't believe you deserve success, fear will keep showing up. If your daily habits drain your energy, fear will feel bigger than it is. If you're not connected to a meaningful purpose, fear will always outweigh your motivation. That's why Brendon asks us to pause and reflect. What stories am I telling myself? Are you telling yourself you're not ready, that you don't have what it takes, that people like you don't succeed? Those stories, not fear itself, are what stop you. Fear is just the smoke. The story is the fire. So, how do you begin to change it? One simple but powerful tool is to write the fear down. Brendon says journaling your fears makes them visible. Take a pen, take a page, and list every fear that's circling in your mind. Be honest. Write the big fears, the small fears, the silly fears. Once you see them written down, you realize two things. First, some fears are irrational, even ridiculous. Second, others are rational, and those are the ones you can plan for. For example, if you fear losing money, you can set a budget. If you fear rejection, you can prepare for conversation. Writing fears down transforms them from shadows into objects you can work with. Once you've named your fears, the next step is to take action. Brendon reminds us that fear loses power when you move. You don't have to leap, you just have to step. Small daily actions build momentum. Each time you act, you gain a little skill. And with skill comes confidence. That's the competence-confidence loop. The more you do, the better you get. The better you get, the more confident you feel. The more confident you feel, the less fear controls you. This is how progress is made, not by waiting for fear to vanish, but by shrinking it through consistent action. Picture someone afraid of public speaking. If they wait for fear to disappear, they'll wait forever. But if they practice speaking in front of just one friend, then a small group, then a larger audience, they gain competence. Each time their confidence grows. Eventually, what once terrified them becomes natural. That is the loop at work. Fear thrives in stillness. It grows stronger in hesitation. But when you write it down, challenge the stories, flip the what-ifs, and take small steps forward. Fear begins to shrink. Brendon teaches that fear is not a sign to stop, it's a signal that you're on the edge of growth. When you understand the pains that create fear and the tools to counter it, you no longer live ruled by imagined losses, endless processes, or empty outcomes. Instead, you live guided by vision, fueled by action, and strengthened by belief. Fear often feels like the loudest voice in the room, but it only dominates when there is nothing louder, nothing greater to guide you. Brendon Burchard teaches that the way to rise above fear is to align yourself with something bigger, your purpose, your values, your mission, your belief. When you live only to avoid pain, fear wins easily. But when you live for something meaningful, fear begins to shrink. Think of someone who values family above all. When fear whispers, don't take the risk. The thought of giving their children a better life speaks louder. But think of someone driven by a mission to serve. Fear says, you're not good enough, but their purpose says, people need you. Brendon explains that fear is a small force compared to the energy of purpose. Purpose pulls you forward while fear pulls you back. When the pull of purpose is stronger, fear no longer controls your steps. Purpose is not complicated. It is simply asking, what matters to me most? What am I willing to fight for? What will I regret if I never try? When you know your answers, fear becomes less intimidating. You stop asking, what if I fail? And start asking, What if I never even try? That shift is powerful. Purpose doesn't remove fear, but it makes fear irrelevant compared to what's at stake. Yet even when you know your purpose, fear will still try to trip you. That's why Brendon urges us to embrace imperfection. Too many people wait until everything is perfect before they start. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect skills, the perfect confidence. But perfection never comes. Growth is always messy. The beginning of anything feels awkward. The process feels ugly. The results are often clumsy at first. And that's okay. Brendon says you must choose faith over perfection. Faith means trusting that the mess is part of the magic. It means knowing you'll stumble, but believing the stumble won't define you. It means saying, I'll figure it out along the way, instead of, I'll start only when I'm ready. When you embrace imperfection, you free yourself from the illusion that fear will disappear if you prepare enough. Fear doesn't vanish. You move forward with it, trusting that every imperfect step will teach you what perfection never could. This brings us to one of the most important lessons. Face fear directly. Brendon says the worst thing you can do is hide from it. When you hide, fear grows in the dark. But when you expose it, when you talk about it, write about it, share it, it loses power. Imagine carrying a heavy weight in silence. The moment you set it down in front of others, it doesn't feel so overwhelming. That's what happens when you express your fears. Examine them closely. What exactly are you afraid of? Exposure to the details often makes them less mysterious. Share them out loud. You'll discover that others have the same fears, and suddenly you feel less alone. Perspective shrinks fear. What once felt like a monster in your mind looks smaller when placed in the light. Brendon reminds us that the act of naming fear is an act of taming fear. Still, there's another strategy that turns fear into fuel. Set bold goals. Not safe goals, not small goals, bold, even crazy ones. Why? Because fear already exists. Whether you aim high or low, if you aim small, fear still whispers. So you may as well aim high and let the challenge stretch you. Brendon says the goals that scare you are the ones that transform you. They demand more courage, more creativity, more growth. But bold goals are not reckless. Pair them with action plans. If your goal scares you because you fear rejection, create a plan for how you'll handle a no. If you fear failure, create a plan for how you'll recover and try again. By preparing for the fears attached to bold goals, you take away their sting. Instead of being stopped by what if, you're ready with if this happens, I'll do that. Bold goals then become not just possible, but inevitable with persistence. Of course, sustaining progress against fear requires daily work on your mindset. Brendon emphasizes vigilance over language. Words are powerful. When you say, I am afraid, you make fear your identity. But when you say, I feel fear right now, you separate it from who you are. Fear is no longer you. It's just a temporary feeling passing through. Replace fearful language with empowering truths. Say, I'm uncertain, but I'm willing to try. Say, this feels scary, but it also means I'm growing. The more you shift your words, the more you shift your reality. Mindset practices are like training the muscles of courage. Use daily reminders of who you want to be. Write affirmations that align with your purpose. For example, I act with courage daily, or I grow through challenges. Check in with yourself every morning and evening. Ask, what did fear try to stop me from today? Did I move anyway? These practices keep fear in perspective. They keep you aware that fear is present but not in control. Brendon often says courage is a habit. It's not something you magically have, it's something you cultivate. Every day you choose to step forward despite fear, you strengthen that habit. Every day you align with purpose, embrace imperfection, face fear directly, set bold goals, and manage your mindset. You make courage easier the next time. Fear doesn't vanish, but its voice gets smaller as your courage grows stronger. Purpose gives you the reason. Imperfection gives you permission. Facing fear gives you clarity. Bold goals give you direction. And mindset practices give you endurance. Together, these create a life where fear still whispers, but it no longer rules. Brendon Burchard reminds us again and again, fear is not the end. Fear is the beginning. It's the signal that you're stepping onto the path where growth lives. And when you align yourself with something bigger than fear, nothing can hold you back. Fear is not some mystery force holding you back. It comes from very specific pains. The fear of loss, the fear of the process, and the fear of the outcome. But you've seen that it doesn't have to control you. You can reframe fear by asking better questions. You can shrink it by taking action. You can rise above it by aligning with your purpose and choosing growth over comfort. So here's the challenge. Pick one fear today, write it down, look it in the eye, then take one small action toward it. Not tomorrow, not someday, today, because the only way fear loses is when you move. Remember, your life is bigger than your fears. You deserve to live boldly, to create freely, and to experience the fullness of who you are. If this message inspired you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Habits of Greatness. Together, we'll keep building the courage to rise higher and live beyond fear.